Every civilization that ever tried to erase demons left behind the same record. They didn't destroy them. They redefined them. The Sumerians carved warnings into clay. The Persians built religions around resisting them. The Hebrews named them and set boundaries. The Christians ranked them, cataloged them, and built hell itself around their hierarchy. And when the modern world declared demons obsolete, they didn't vanish. They adapted. Across thousands of years, cultures that never met, never shared language, and never exchanged belief systems all describe the same thing. Unseen forces that attach to behavior, erode order, and return whenever restraint collapses. Different names, different faces, the same pattern. This is not a story about superstition. It is a record of continuity. Because if demons were only myths, they would have disappeared when belief did. Instead, they followed humanity forward, reshaping themselves to fit every age that tried to escape them. And the most unsettling part is this. The more rational we became, the less prepared we were to recognize them. Long before demons were imagined as fallen angels or rulers of hell, they were recorded as events. The earliest civilizations did not debate whether demons existed. They documented what they believed was actively harming them. Sudden illness, madness without cause, crops failing overnight, infants wasting away in their sleep. These were not metaphors. They were crises demanding explanation and control. In ancient Mesopotamia, demons were not villains. They were forces. The Sumerians carved their names into clay tablets as warnings, not stories. Entities like Asag, Lamish II, and Pazuzu were believed to roam freely, bringing disease, nightmares, infertility, and death. There was no concept of moral evil yet. These beings did not punish sin. They attacked without reason, like storms or droughts. What terrified ancient people was not cruelty. It was indifference. Demons were not enemies with motives. They were pressures on reality itself, invisible agents that disrupted the fragile order of human life. A child sickened suddenly was not unlucky. It was seized. A man who spoke in tongues or wandered into the desert was not mad. Something had entered him. This belief shaped behavior. Homes were marked. Amulets were worn. Incantations were spoken aloud, not as prayers, but as defensive measures. These were the earliest forms of demonology, not worship but containment. One detail appears again and again in these texts. Demons were believed to cling to thresholds, doorways, windows, beds, wombs. Places of transition were considered vulnerable because they represented moments where order weakened. Sleep, birth, illness, travel. Demons did not invade fortified spaces. They waited for the moment when human control thinned. Even at this early stage, a pattern emerges that will never disappear. Demons appear where structure fails. As civilizations advanced, these forces became more defined. The Akkadians expanded demon lists, assigning specific afflictions to specific entities. Madness, fever, paralysis, infertility each had a name, a presence, a behavioral signature. This was not myth-making. It was classification born of fear. But there is something far more unsettling beneath these records. Demons were not portrayed as rare. They were expected. Ancient life assumed constant exposure. Protection was not optional. Ritual was not superstition. It was survival. To neglect protection was to invite harm. To forget boundaries was to create openings. Even at the dawn of civilization, people understood something modern audiences often forget. The unseen did not need belief to act. Demons were not sustained by worship. They were resisted by vigilance. And when vigilance failed, when rituals were neglected, when boundaries were ignored, the tablets are clear about the outcome. The forces returned. They always returned. The moment demons became truly terrifying was not when they were named. It was when they were given purpose. This shift occurs most clearly in ancient Persia, within the framework of Zoroastrianism. one of the earliest belief systems to define existence as a battlefield between order and corruption. Here, demons are no longer random afflictions. They are active agents of collapse. At the center of this system stands Ungra Mainyu, later known as Ahriman, the destructive spirit opposing cosmic order. Around him gather the Devas, entities devoted not to chaos for its own sake, but to the systematic undoing of structure. This distinction matters. Chaos burns quickly. Opposition endures. Zoroastrian demonology presents demons as entities that attack the foundations of reality itself. They corrupt thought, distort ritual, fracture family bonds, and weaken law. Their goal is not immediate destruction, but long-term decay. They seek to exhaust order rather than confront it. This is the first time demons are described as strategic. They target fire temples. They pollute sacred spaces. They interfere with prayer and ritual. Not because they fear holiness, but because ritual maintains boundaries, and boundaries limit access. Here, demonology introduces a critical idea that will persist through every later tradition. Demons do not merely harm individuals. They weaken systems. The Devas are repeatedly described as whisperers, disturbers of judgment, and sowers of internal conflict. They thrive where clarity dissolves, where duty becomes negotiable, where discipline is treated as excess. And for the first time, demons are blamed not just for suffering, but for moral erosion. Madness is no longer just illness. It is invasion. Disobedience is no longer just rebellion. It is contamination. This framework transforms demonology permanently. Evil is no longer accidental. It is oppositional. Demons are no longer pests to be driven away. They are enemies to be resisted. Zoroastrian texts emphasize vigilance above all else. Every action, every thought, every ritual either strengthens order or feeds corruption. There's no neutral ground. Demons exploit hesitation, negligence, and delay. Most disturbing of all is how demons are described to enter the world. Not through summoning, not through worship, but through failure. Failure to uphold ritual. Failure to enforce law. Failure to maintain moral clarity. When these failures accumulate, demons gain influence without ever being called. This is the moment demonology becomes a warning rather than a belief. The world is not protected by faith alone. It is protected by maintenance. And when maintenance stops, the texts are clear. The enemy does not need to knock. He is already inside. Judaism did not invent demons. It contained them. Earlier traditions described demons as external threats. Jewish texts did something far more unsettling. They placed demons inside the moral and legal structure of daily life. Evil was no longer distant. It was something that moved through communities, families, and behavior itself. In Hebrew scripture, demons are rarely described in detail. That absence is deliberate. Instead of vivid imagery, texts focus on function. Demons are what attach themselves to transgression, negligence, and boundary violation. This is where figures like Shedim, Lilith, Azazel, Belial, and Asmodeus emerge. Not as monsters roaming the wilderness, but as presences that exploit vulnerability. Lilith appears at the edges of family life, threatening childbirth and infancy. Shedim are associated with abandoned places, unclean spaces, and neglected structures. Azazel is cast into the wilderness, burdened with the collective weight of communal transgression. The message is unmistakable. Demons inhabit what is left unattended. The Dead Sea Scrolls intensify this fear. In these apocalyptic writings, the world is divided between forces of light and darkness, with Belial named as the leader of corruption. But again, the horror is not conquest. Belial does not storm cities. He infiltrates them. He governs through distortion. Justice becomes inconsistent. Truth becomes negotiable. Authority loses legitimacy. These texts warn that demons gain power when law exists without enforcement, when ritual is performed without conviction, when obedience becomes symbolic rather than real. This is demonology as internal decay. Possession is described, but it is not the primary threat. The greater danger is influence, slow, corrosive, almost invisible. A person does not suddenly become evil. They become careless, then permissive, then contemptuous of restraint. By the time corruption is visible, the text suggests it is already entrenched. One of the most disturbing aspects of Jewish demonology is its refusal to dramatize exorcism. There are protections, amulets, prayers, and boundaries, but no promise of permanent victory. Demons can be repelled. They cannot be erased. This restraint is intentional. Judaism treats demons not as enemies to be defeated, but as conditions to be managed. They return when vigilance fades. They exploit moments of transition, sleep, illness, birth, travel, just as the earliest civilizations believed. But now the threat has evolved. Demons do not just cause harm. They reshape behavior. They turn communities inward. They erode trust. They isolate individuals under the illusion of normalcy. And this is the warning that carries forward into every later tradition. The most dangerous demons do not announce themselves. They embed. Christianity did not reduce demons. It organized them. Earlier traditions treated demons as threats to be managed. Christian theology reframed them as part of a vast, deliberate structure. Fallen intelligences bound together by rebellion and sustained by hierarchy. Evil was no longer scattered. It was administrative. At the center of this system stands a fall. Demons are not created as monsters. They are fallen angels, entities that once existed within divine order and now exist in opposition to it. This origin is critical to their danger. They understand structure because they once served within it. They know authority because they once embodied it. Hell, in Christian demonology, is not chaos. It is order inverted. Medieval theologians describe hell as a kingdom, complete with ranks, offices, and chains of command. Demons are assigned roles. They govern specific sins. They command legions. Their influence is methodical, not impulsive. This is where demonology takes its most chilling form. Evil is no longer an accident of nature. It is managed. Figures like Lucifer, Beelzebub, Asmodeus, and Belial are no longer local threats. They are princes, governors, strategists. Each represents a mode of corruption, pride, decay, lust, lawlessness, operating in coordination rather than isolation. Christian texts emphasize temptation over possession. Demons do not need to enter the body to destroy the soul. They influence thought, desire, and choice. A whispered suggestion is more effective than force. A delayed consequence is more damaging than immediate punishment. This framework transforms fear. The battlefield is no longer external. It is internal. Exorcism becomes formalized, but so do warnings. Priests are instructed that demons exploit arrogance, carelessness, and overconfidence. Rituals require precision because demons obey rules only to expose weakness. A single lapse in authority invites resistance. Most unsettling is the idea that demons cannot be destroyed. They can be restrained. They can be cast out, but they endure. Christian demonology insists that hell persists until the end of time. Evil is not eradicated, it is contained. This creates a terrifying implication. Humanity exists in proximity to a permanent adversarial system that adapts, learns, and waits. But does not rush. It recruits. By giving demons rank and history, Christianity made them harder to dismiss. They were no longer shadows blamed for misfortune. They were intelligences with memory, patience, and strategy. And once demons had hierarchy, they no longer needed chaos. They needed access. There is a moment in demonological history when fear gives way to confidence. That moment is recorded in the grimoires. Unlike religious texts, grimoires are not warnings. They are manuals. They assume demons are real, present, and accessible, and they make a claim more dangerous than denial: that demons can be commanded. Texts like the Testament of Solomon, the Lesser Key of Solomon, and later European grimoires describe demons not as uncontrollable horrors, but as entities bound by divine names, sigils, and ritual law. Each demon is listed with a title, a rank, a function, and instructions for summoning. This is where demonology crosses a line. For the first time, humans do not ask how to repel demons. They ask how to use them. The rituals are precise. Circles must be drawn perfectly. Names must be spoken without error. Authority must be asserted without hesitation. The magician is warned repeatedly. Doubt invites resistance. Fear invites deception. Pride invites retaliation. These are not metaphors. The texts read like legal contracts negotiated under threat. Demons are described as liars, but also as rule-bound. They exploit ambiguity. They twist commands. They deliver exactly what is asked, never what is intended. Grimoires insist that demons obey authority not because they respect it, but because they are waiting for it to fail. And failure is inevitable. The Ars Goetia presents demons as specialists. Some grant knowledge. Some reveal secrets. Some influence desire, wealth, or power. But every description carries a warning disguised as instruction. The summoner must maintain absolute control, absolute clarity, absolute restraint. Any lapse shifts the balance. This is where the horror becomes explicit. Many grimoires include accounts of summoners who vanished, went mad, or achieved their goals only to lose everything else. The texts do not dramatize these outcomes. They note them calmly, as expected consequences. The implication is chilling. The ritual work. The cost came later. Demons in grimoires are not portrayed as enemies to be defeated, but as negotiators. They enter agreements knowing humans cannot sustain the discipline required to enforce them. Time favors the demon. Exhaustion favors the demon. Overconfidence favors the demon. The circle does not protect forever. What makes this era so dangerous is not arrogance alone. It is normalization. Demonology becomes technical, procedural, repeatable. The supernatural is treated as manageable through method. This strips demons of mythic terror and replaces it with operational familiarity. That familiarity is lethal, because demons do not need to overpower humans who believe they are in control. They only need to wait until control slips. And the grimoires make one thing painfully clear. It always does. The modern world did not banish demons. It rebranded them. As science and psychology rose, possession was renamed disorder. Obsession became compulsion. Intrusive thoughts became symptoms. The language changed, but the patterns did not. What earlier cultures called external forces, the modern world framed as internal malfunction. And demonology adapted quietly. In the 19th and 20th centuries, belief in literal demons declined sharply. Ritual protection was replaced by diagnosis. Exorcism gave way to treatment. The unseen was no longer feared, it was explained. But explanation did not bring control. What unsettled early psychologists was not that people hallucinated demons, but that the same behaviors kept repeating across cultures, eras, and individuals with no shared belief system. Compulsion, self-sabotage, fixation, sudden personality fracture, destructive impulses that felt foreign to the person experiencing them. The old descriptions still fit. Something attaches, something whispers, something erodes restraint. Modern demonology does not appear in churches or grimoires. It appears in patterns. Addiction that resists consequence. Obsession that survives self-awareness. Rage that bypasses identity. Desire that consumes rather than satisfies. The names disappear. The functions remain. Horror films, literature, and popular culture preserve demon imagery not because of nostalgia, but because the symbols still work. Audiences recognize possession even when they don't believe in it. They recognize influence. They recognize erosion. They recognize the feeling of losing control without knowing why. Occult practitioners noticed this long ago. Modern occultism rarely emphasizes summoning. It focuses on integration, shadow work, and internal forces. But the warnings remain unchanged. Do not remove boundaries without replacing them. Do not dissolve structure without understanding what fills the void. Because something always does. The most unsettling shift is this. Demons no longer need belief to operate. In fact, disbelief makes them harder to detect. When everything is assumed to originate internally, nothing is resisted externally. There are no wards, no volundities, no language for intrusion. Ancient demonology feared ignorance. Modern demonology thrives on certainty. Certainty that nothing external exists. Certainty that everything can be controlled. Certainty that the past was simply wrong. This is not a return to superstition. It is a warning about pattern blindness. When humanity decided demons were obsolete, it stopped watching for them. And what stopped being watched did not disappear. It became ambient, background noise, normalized behavior. The demons of the modern age do not knock. They are already inside the system, renamed, reclassified, and left unattended. Every age believes it has finally outgrown demons. And every age is wrong. From clay tablets to sacred scripture, from grimoires to psychology textbooks, demonology never disappears. It changes language, changes symbols, changes explanations, but it never breaks its pattern. That is the real horror. Demons persist not because people believe in them, but because human behavior keeps creating the conditions they require. Neglect, obsession, collapse of restraint, erosion of meaning. These patterns repeat across civilizations with mechanical precision. The ancient world blamed external spirits. The religious world named and ranked them. The modern world internalized them. But the behavior remains unchanged. This is why demonology cannot end. It is not dependent on myth. It is not dependent on ritual. It is not dependent on belief. Demons survive because they attach to repetition. Every time boundaries weaken, something fills the space. Every time discipline collapses, influence replaces control. Every time a system forgets why it exists, corruption inherits it. Ancient demonologists understood something modern audiences resist. Demons are not intrusions into reality. They are byproducts of failure within it. They do not need to be summoned. They manifest when order decays long enough to invite occupation. This is why demonology keeps returning to the same warnings. Maintain structure. Enforce boundaries. Do not mistake neglect for freedom. The most dangerous belief is not faith in demons. It is certainty that they are no longer relevant. Because when demons are dismissed as superstition, vigilance collapses. There are no longer signs to watch for. No language to describe influence. No framework for resistance. Everything becomes normalized, explained, absorbed, until the damage is complete. Demonology never promised victory. It promised awareness. Every civilization that ignored that warning paid the same price. Not sudden destruction, but slow internal failure. Trust dissolving, meaning hollowing out. Control slipping quietly until nothing held. And by the time anyone noticed, there was nothing left to expel. Because the demon was no longer an outsider. It had become part of the structure. This is why demonology survives history. Not as religion, not as superstition, but as a record of what happens when restraint fades and patterns repeat. Demons do not need to return. They never left. Subscribe.